Welcome back to A1 Storyteller, where the most powerful, emotional, and eye-opening stories come to life. Today's tale takes us into the heart of British tradition, duty, and one man's quiet defiance that shook a nation. It's a story that reminds us that even the most stoic hearts can carry deep love, loyalty, and grief. Stay with us until the end, because this one is guaranteed to move you, and perhaps even change how you see honor and humanity forever. Sergeant Major Nathaniel Clark's story didn't begin in the marble halls of Buckingham Palace, nor in the regal silence of Westminster Abbey. It began in a modest, red-bricked council estate on the south side of Birmingham, where trains rattled past crumbling walls and life was lived honestly, if not always easily. Nathaniel, or Nate as his mother called him, was the second of two sons. His father, Thomas Clark, worked double shifts at the rail yard, while his mother, Lillian, spent her days as a nurse at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Theirs was a family of quiet sacrifice. No holidays abroad, no luxury, but there was dignity, plenty of it. From an early age, Nate understood structure. Chores weren't optional. His school uniform was always pressed, and respect for others, especially elders, wasn't just encouraged. He took Nate to the park to play football, stood up to bullies in school, and taught him how to polish his shoes until they shone. Marcus had one dream: to serve his country, and by 18 he had joined the British Army. Nate, then 12, beamed with pride as Marcus left for basic training. "I'll be home with medals, little man," Marcus had promised, ruffling Nate's hair. But the medals came home without him. 3 years into his service, Marcus was deployed to Afghanistan. One dusty morning, a roadside bomb tore through his convoy. He died instantly. Nate was 16. The Clark household was never the same. Their father sank into silence. Their mother wore black for a year and spoke in hushed tones. Nate didn't cry. Not then. He spent hours in Marcus's room, staring at his brother's uniform, the photo of him smiling in fatigues, the half-written letter, B never finished. And then a letter came from the palace. It bore the royal crest, written on thick parchment in the Queen's own hand. "To the Clark family, I offer my deepest sympathies for the loss of Lance Corporal Marcus Clark. He served his nation with valor and will never be forgotten. In service and sorrow, Elizabeth R." Nathaniel read that letter every night for a month, not because it healed the pain, but because someone who represented everything Marcus had fought for, had remembered him. From that moment, Nate knew what he would become. Not just a soldier, a guard, not just a servant of the state, a protector of the crown. And so, the journey began. By 17, Nate enlisted in the British Army. He trained with relentless focus, waking early, running miles through mud and snow, pushing past every limit. When others gave up, Nate dug deeper. His instructors noticed. He was selected for advanced infantry training and soon after, for the household division, the elite group tasked with guarding the monarch herself. Only the best made it in, and Nate wasn't just accepted. He thrived. By his mid-30s, Nathaniel Clark had risen to the rank of Sergeant Major. He had served tours abroad, earned medals for distinguished conduct, and guarded Buckingham Palace more times than he could count. But behind every perfectly timed salute, behind every stoic stance, was still the boy from Birmingham, still carrying his brother's memory, and the Queen's letter. To the world, the Queen was a symbol, stoic, constant, unwavering. To Nathaniel Clark, she was something more. The first time he saw her in person was during his early days as a guardsman. It was a chilly morning at Windsor Castle. He stood motionless as trained, his rifle resting against his shoulder, his bearskin hat towering above him. And then she appeared. Not in a motorcade or surrounded by fanfare, but walking calmly with her corgis, dressed in a sky blue coat, her signature handbag swinging gently by her side. She passed within feet of him. Their eyes met for a brief second. That was it. No words, no gesture. But for Nathaniel, it was enough to solidify a sense of duty stronger than anything he had ever felt. As years passed, their paths crossed more often. He was present at official banquets, royal weddings, and state ceremonies. While he maintained strict protocol, there were moments, brief and meaningful, where the Queen acknowledged him. During one winter, while assigned to Sandringham Estate, the Queen approached the guards during a less formal morning walk. "You must be cold," she said with a gentle smile. "Oh, no colder than Her Majesty, I imagine," Nathaniel replied before realizing his breach of formality. To his relief, she chuckled softly. "A good answer, Mr. Clark." That was the first time she said his name. It became a quiet routine. Whenever she passed him on guard, she would nod and say, "Oh, Clark." A simple acknowledgement, but one no guardsman took lightly. It wasn't until the Queen's Jubilee that their bond deepened. Nathaniel had just been promoted and was selected to receive a medal for exemplary service. At the ceremony in the palace ballroom, the Queen pinned the medal to his chest herself. "You lost a brother in Afghanistan, didn't you?" she asked quietly. He blinked. "Yes, ma'am. I remember writing that letter." She paused, looking him directly in the eye. "He would have been proud of you." Nathaniel felt the air leave his lungs. No one else could have known what that meant to him. No one else could have said it with such weight. From that day forward, his service took on deeper meaning. He wasn't just guarding a monarch. He was honoring someone who had once honored his family in their darkest hour. He never told anyone. Not his fellow guards. Not his commanding officers. That bond remained private, sacred. And as fate would have it, it would one day lead to the moment that shocked the world and reminded an entire nation what loyalty truly meant. The air was heavy in London in September. There was no sun, only gray clouds rolling like grief above the city's ancient stone walls. The news had broken like thunder. Queen Elizabeth II had passed away peacefully at Balmoral Castle. The moment the world had long feared, dreaded even, had finally arrived. Union Jacks were lowered to half-mast across the country. Crowds gathered silently outside Buckingham Palace, watching as the black doors remained closed, their hearts breaking with a quiet dignity that mirrored the monarch they had lost. Nathaniel Clark stood in the guards' quarters, eyes fixed on the television. His uniform hung neatly beside him, pressed the night before as always. But today it felt heavier. His hands, trained to remain still under fire, now trembled as he watched the black hearse carry the Queen's body down from Scotland. That evening, the call came. "Nathaniel," his commanding officer said, "you've been chosen as lead sentinel for Her Majesty's funeral detail at Westminster Abbey." Clark didn't speak. "You'll stand beside her coffin during the lying in state. The eyes of the world will be on you. Do your duty as always." "Do your as always." "Yes, sir," Nathaniel replied. His voice was steady, but his heart was in pieces. He stood alone in his quarters after the call. The Queen, his queen, was gone. The same woman who'd comforted his family after his brother's death. The same one who had called him by name when she didn't need to. When she didn't need to. The one who had remembered a guardsman's grief when the rest of the world had moved on. Now it was his turn to remember her, but not with words, with silence. He opened the top drawer of his locker and pulled out a small, worn box. Inside was his brother Marcus's silver medallion, engraved with the words, "In valor there is hope." It had been Marcus's most cherished item, a token he'd carried into battle. A symbol of courage and sacrifice. Nathaniel had never worn it, but that night he placed it gently inside his chest pocket over his heart. He knew what he had to do the day of the funeral arrived with a stillness that blanketed the nation. The streets were lined with mourners in black, standing shoulder to shoulder in complete silence. No chants, no cries, only bowed heads and damp eyes. It was as if the very breath of the country had been held in reverence. Inside Westminster Abbey, History seemed to echo through the walls. The gold-arched ceilings, the stained glass windows, and the centuries-old flagstones had seen monarchs crowned and buried, but never a moment quite like this. Nathaniel Clark stood at the head of the Queen's casket. His red tunic was perfect, his bearskin cap casting a shadow across his brow. To the thousands watching in the Abbey, and the millions watching on screens across the world, he looked every inch the model soldier, unmoving, stoic, eternal. But within him, emotion raged like a storm. The Queen's coffin rested just inches behind him, draped in the royal standard, the imperial state crown glittering atop it, surrounded by lilies, roses, and the scepter and orb. Nathaniel's breath was measured, every movement practiced. Vujde. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the sound of the choir, as the Abbey's choir lifted their voices in the ancient hymn, "Abide with me." Something inside him cracked. He remembered her laugh, her voice, her presence, the way she looked at him during his medal ceremony, knowing his pain without needing to say a word. His eyes burned, but he did not move. The cameras zoomed in on his face. The public didn't know his story. They didn't know why his jaw clenched slightly or why his lips pressed so tightly together. They didn't know the war happening behind his quiet eyes. The hymn ended, and then came the moment that would echo through history. It happened slowly. At first, many thought they were seeing things, a flicker on screen, a glitch, some small tremble of imagination, but it was real. Nathaniel Clark moved. He took a step forward, just one, then another. Gasps whispered through the Abbey. Guards did not move during service, especially not during the Queen's funeral. It was the first rule, the one law that had never been broken. Nathaniel reached the edge of the coffin. He turned slowly and faced it, his shoulders square, his eyes locked on the flag-draped casket. And then he did the unthinkable. He dropped to one knee, in full uniform, in front of kings, princes, dignitaries, and the eyes of an entire planet. He kneeled. There was no drama in his movement, no flourish, only stillness, reverence. And then gently, he reached into his chest pocket and pulled out the small silver medallion, his brother's. He placed it carefully on the coffin, beside the flowers. A gift from one loyal soldier to another. Tears welled in his eyes. "I never got to say goodbye," he whispered, barely audible. "I thank you, ma'am, for everything." The choir paused. The organist stumbled. Everyone in Westminster was holding their breath. And then, as though nothing had happened, Nathaniel rose. He turned, walked back to his post, and stood, still, silent, soldier once more. But everything had changed. The cameras had caught every second. The world saw it. Live. Social media exploded. Royal Guard breaks protocol. A soldier kneels at Queen's coffin. The moment that stopped time. Some called it disgraceful. Some called it disgraceful. A few shouted tradition had been insulted. But those voices were drowned by millions who saw it for what it truly was. A final salute. A broken-hearted goodbye. A love letter to the monarch who had shown a young boy from Birmingham that even royalty could be human. The moment Nathaniel kneeled at the Queen's coffin, the world reacted. By dawn the next morning, the footage had been shared over 100 million times. News outlets from Tokyo to Toronto called it the most emotional moment of the Queen's funeral. Royal commentators were stunned. Former soldiers spoke with trembling voices on morning radio. And within hours, Buckingham Palace summoned him. Nathaniel arrived in his dress uniform, the same one he had worn during the funeral. He was escorted not to a courtroom or tribunal, but to a private drawing room within the palace, where a panel of senior royal advisors, military generals, and palace officials sat in quiet judgment. The room was silent as he entered. One of the generals, his medals flashing under the chandelier light, spoke first. "Sergeant Major Clark, do you understand what you've done?" Nathaniel stood firm. "Yes, sir. You broke centuries of protocol." A sentinel has never left his post during a royal funeral. Ever. "I'm aware, sir." The silence stretched again. Then another voice, softer, more familiar, spoke from the far end of the table. It was Prince William, now the new king. He leaned forward, his voice steady but warm. "We watched it happen in real time, Mr. Clark. So did my children. So did my grandmother's people. And I have to ask you, why did you do it?" Nathaniel took a breath, and then, slowly, clearly, bravely, he told them. He told them about Marcus, about the Queen's letter, about the bond that had existed in silence for years, about how, in one moment, he didn't see a monarch's coffin. He saw a woman who had once lifted his family from despair with a single handwritten sentence. When he finished, the room remained silent. No one moved. Then, slowly, King William stood. He stepped forward, past the table, until he was directly in front of Nathaniel. And in a moment that echoed like thunder through the centuries of British tradition, he extended his hand. "A thank you, Sergeant Major," the king said. "What you did reminded the world who she was." Nathaniel, overcome, saluted. "A thank you, Your Majesty." That was all. No punishment, no reprimand, just a nod. And a nation, watching from afar, wept again. Weeks passed. The Queen was laid to rest in St. George's Chapel at Windsor beside Prince Philip, her beloved husband. The world slowly returned to its rhythm, but Nathaniel's moment had become a symbol. Schools showed the footage in history lessons. Artists painted it. Journalists wrote books. And yet Nathaniel returned to his post just as he always had. Quiet, dignified, silent, until one morning, as he stood guard once more at the gates of Buckingham Palace, a page arrived with a message. He was summoned again, this time to the White Drawing Room, where foreign dignitaries were often received. There, with only a few photographers and the king present, Nathaniel was called forward, and placed into his hand was a new medal, the Queen's honor of devoted service. It had never existed before. A medal created not for valor in battle or years of service, but for compassion, for loyalty beyond duty. And engraved on the back in delicate swirling script were 5 simple words. She remembered, so did he. As he stepped outside, the wind carried the faint sound of church bells across the city. Children waved, old veterans saluted. Tourists clapped, not knowing the full story, but feeling something sacred had just taken place. And above them, in the clouds above London, it seemed, for a moment, the sky broke into sunlight. This has been another powerful story from your favorite channel, A1 Storyteller. If this story moved your heart, if you felt the tears rise when that guard kneeled in front of the world, then know you're not alone, because this wasn't just about a soldier. It was about a promise, about a brother's memory, about a queen who saw every soul, even in silence, and a nation that paused to feel something real. Subscribe now to A1 Storyteller for more unforgettable true life stories that break boundaries, stir souls, and bring truth to light. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Nathaniel's shoes? And have you ever broken the rules to honor someone you love? From loyalty to legacy, from heartbreak to history, we bring you the stories that matter, right here, every week. Don't forget to hit the bell icon, because the next story, it might just change how you see the world. A1 Storyteller, where every story is more than a story. It's a truth that echoes.